3, 2, 1. It's time to G-E-O.
G-E-O.
Ready?
Go.
Here we go.
Let's go.
Welcome again to Behind the Why.
Hello.
Today we're back here. We're not in the studio. You can see, and I want to say before I forget again, that we're going to be getting the podcast audio versions back online here soon. We just had a technical problem with not being in the studio. We'll get that back up and running here before long. So, here we go. Let's get behind the why. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. As we get started in our conversation today, we want to remind our audience, please, to like and subscribe. Guys, we need to get this conversation going. If there's ever a time here in America where we need to be talking to one another, this is it.
Today is the day.
Just get the conversation. Hit subscribe, hit like, share it with everybody you know, especially people who you think might not agree with us, and then encourage them to come online and talk to us. Drop a comment down there so we can talk about what's happening. Right. Because I think it's time that we, as Americans, come together
and challenge one another's perspective.
Absolutely.
I think it's so important.
Absolutely. It's you know, I was encouraged myself. I was thinking. I was listening to this one minister talk, and he was starting to present something in a way I thought was so stupid, because he was talking about this whole racial issue and just blowing it way out of proportion. And so I said no. I stopped myself, and I sat and listened to it. I listened to the whole thing, and I said okay, because I was just getting kind of fed up with this whole we black folk need your pity.
It's exhausting though.
It's so hard.
It really is.
You know what I'm seeing all these videos, people want to bow down and polish people's shoes as if that's going to change anything. It's like, how in the heck are you bowing down and polishing people's shoes going to change anything? What you really need to do is get engaged in the political arena, which is set up in this country. We have three parts of the government that are supposed to be three opposing parts to keep each other counterbalanced. But if we, the people, don't get involved and hold our representatives accountable, then we get this stupid stuff that's happening in the Supreme Court now, where you have people from the bench legislating rather than interpreting the law. They start to legislate, creating law, and that's when the American government begins to break down. So we, the people, have to hold our elected representatives and those non-elected accountable.
You know, one thing that I watched this interview of these two women. They were captive in Iran. I believe the book is called Captive in Iran.
Okay.
But anyways, they're Christian women who were in prison there. And at the end of the podcast they were on, one of the gals, she had said how important it is to become politically involved. And she was just for Christians to get involved, basically to have a voice and to speak for people. And she said because in Iran, she's like, Christians aren't the only people oppressed. She's like, there are 80 million people there who are oppressed because they have evil people in power, and it's an Islamic regime state, really. And
see, a lot of people don't realize that
they don't.
This Islamic state, it's only been in power since 1979.
Which blows my mind, because
since 1979.
And they talked about that too. They said before that it was people had freedoms, women could wear makeup and everything.
Iran was part of the first world countries, nations of the world. They had, I mean, not all things first world are good, okay, but they had pop music, they had
they had
culture,
the freedoms
everything.
to, like, you know, do
women
stuff.
worked, women had careers, and then this totalitarian, I got it down this time, regime comes in and sets them back 300 years.
And what got me about it is what she said at the end is she and her friend are basically wanting to get involved politically because they have experience with international affairs, because now they're in the U.S. and they're encouraging other people, you know, get involved, use your voice, because in America we still have freedoms. She's like, and when you lose them, you might not get them back, and that's happened in Iran.
There's no guarantee.
And I was just kind of like, wow, how important it is as Christians, because a lot of people, like, you get as a Christian kind of separate their worlds, and they're basically like, no, you're a Christian, bring that into these spheres
wherever you are.
And I was really encouraged by that myself, to be like, I need to get involved more.
I hear people say all the time, they go, you know, separation church and state, separation church and state, and you go, well, first of all, that's not in the Constitution. It's not part of the U.S. Constitution.
Not in the way people interpret it.
It's not in the Constitution.
In the way
What it was a letter, I think it was written to Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Madison, one of those, from a clergyman in his home state region, encouraging him, hey, don't you allow the government now to start infringing on church rights. It had nothing to do with the church not influencing the government, because we, the people, make up America. And if you are a Christian, then you are to influence government, because you as a Christian do that. But government can't come into your church and tell you how you can and cannot worship. And so we've got it all backwards. We allow ourselves to be cornswoggled by fast talking.
That's a new word I've never heard.
You never heard that word before?
I like it.
Sometimes I go down south on y'all. Forgive me.
Cornswoggle. I'm going to use that sometime.
We get duped. We have the wool pulled over our eyes by fast-talking politicians and smooth-speaking orators, and we don't ever stop to bother to check their facts. And this is why I did what I did on this last presentation. I heard this one minister talking about this systemic racism.
Right.
And he was going back to a system that existed 30, 35 years ago. And I said, I agree. Yes, we were coming out of the 70s. You remember, like I said, I was born in the early 60s, and the civil rights movement passed in 64. We had all these things going on that happened. America was changing dramatically.
Right.
So coming into the 70s, we had
taking
Kent
place.
State with the big shooting there that took place on the campus there. All these things were happening dramatically coming into the 70s. And then we were beginning to find out who we were.
Right.
So yes, there was layovers of systemic racism that still existed. Now coming forward into the 80s, yes,
Right.
there were systemic racism even in the church. And I still think that now the problem we find in the church is, especially in the Southern Baptist Conference, is that they're trying to overcompensate for some of the systemic racism that has been inherent in their denomination by yielding into this CRT, this
Right.
critical race theory, and they're bending way over backwards, and they're bending right past the gospel
Right.
to become socially aware. And this is what I see happening in the church too often. And we look around the country today, and you have to ask yourself, where is the church?
And what has really just strunken me. I couldn't think of the word. I have a degree. Yes, I do. I went to college and I lost my brain. Anyways, but something that's really influenced me or impacted me lately in the sense of like, wow. I think we often forget as a church, people forget that the enemy comes as an angel of light.
Yes.
I was like, if I saw something coming at me looking all ugly, okay, I would not be like, oh, no, I'd run.
Yes.
So Satan is subtle, and the lies of the enemy are so, we talked about this before, so close to the truth in some ways, where it's like, oh, that sounds good, that looks good, this is a righteous battle.
The first presentation of
like,
Satan in Scripture is one who is subtle.
Right. And I think we forget that.
And we do, and because we have bought into the lie of the pitchfork and horns and
Right.
tail, and like I said, the nasty drooling. Yeah, that's his character. But how many times have you seen a good-looking person with a horrible character?
Right.
See, that's what Satan looks like.
Right.
He's beautiful. He's very attractive, but his character's debased. And so when we see these things happening, we have to stop and ask ourselves, what is going on?
Right.
Now, and this most recent shooting situation that happened down in Atlanta. When you first brought that to my attention, I looked at it, I saw the video, and I said, you know what, that's horrible, but, under the guise of standard police work, that's a good shooting.
Right.
That's a good shooting because of the fact that this guy disarmed an officer because he turned around and in the heat of battle fired a weapon at the officer. The officer returned fire. It was a good shooting. So on the basis there. And so then when I heard that the mayor had come out and demanded this officer's termination, and I was like, wow, okay, we have gone crazy. Because now what we're doing is we're yielding to the politics of Black Lives Matter,
Right.
which says
That's scary.
we don't worry about legislation, we don't worry about courts and trials, we tell you what we want, and then if you don't give it to us, we force you to do it.
Right.
That's the government of tyranny. And that all made me, again, think back about the church and about people of good character. And I was thinking about the Declaration of Independence, and this is where I was just thinking, what must it have been like? Again, I always want to go back and say that there's never been a time where there's been a group of human beings who are perfect. Never.
What?
But there has been times when men have stood in the light.
Yep.
And there's been times when God has governed in men's affairs, sometimes unaware to the men who he was governing.
Right.
And I think in the founding of this nation was one of those times where there were men who stood in the light, and there was other men who was being governed by God, not even aware that they were being governed. And that's what we see. And we hear the preamble say what? Not the preamble, but in the Declaration says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. I got notes over there so I wouldn't get it wrong.
Right.
That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we talked about this a long time ago. But you think about this idea that these men recognize that God had given every individual rights that didn't come from government. So therefore the government cannot take them away.
Because they came from
They
you
came
being
from
created
the Creator.
by God.
Exactly. And so we see that as a foundation for this nation. And even though men were corrupt and evil men used the law of the land to establish systems whereby they could be empowered by oppressing other people,
Right.
we still see that the law was good and that it inevitably allowed the sons and daughters of those same oppressed people to break out of their bondage
Right.
using the same law, because the law itself was good.
You can see how when we get away from that basic truth that we are all created by God,
Right.
endowed with really this life that the
Right.
Lord has given us, that my government can't infringe upon, cannot, should not, right? And so in Atlanta, Georgia, right, when the mayor comes out and says, oh, he needs to be fired immediately, and he was fired, you're kind of like, wow, that was a quick, crazy move. And then not only that, we see this escalation of lawlessness.
Right.
So this happens, and then they say now he's charged
The
with
district attorney wants
felony murder with the possibility of a death sentence.
And you look at this, and the
that
reason
blows
I
my
bring
mind.
that up is for two reasons. One is because we always have to wonder what is going on.
Oh, yeah.
When you see all this stuff up here, you watch when you watch a good fighter, he does what's called feinting and parring. So I'll show you this because I want to hit you with this.
So I'll be distracted over here.
And so that's what we look at this. We have all this stuff going on politically speaking now. All this stuff happening that's all up in your face. All up in your face. Got black people running all over this country, burning their own communities down, killing each other, yelling and screaming, destroying everything, destroying businesses, schools, everything's just destroying stuff, and all the time screaming that is somehow Donald Trump's fault or systemic racism's fault. And it's like, okay, this is making no sense. You're weakening yourself.
Right.
You're destroying yourself. And you have to ask yourself, to what end?
Right.
The people, the money people behind all these things. You hear names like, the Sorosans that keep coming up.
Soros.
Yeah, Soros. I keep saying Soros keeps coming up. Names like the Clintons keep coming up. All these names that pop out of nowhere. And you ask yourself whether these people are involved. I don't know.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself this question, to what end?
Right. What is the purpose?
Is this continual destruction of the black community? What is the end of it? And then when you overlay on top of that, you say, okay, church, the church of the living God. When you find the church abandoning its scriptural and biblical roots to accommodate this social justice that's happening, you have to ask yourself, to what end?
There's a woman I follow on Instagram, and I do not remember her name, but I know it says Truth and Fire. If you put that in, you might come to her name. But she made a post that was so right on, and she's talking about things that are happening right now, because there's a lot happening in the Supreme Court that is like, what?
Nobody's seeing.
All of these things. And she was really talking about the church, saying Satan is running laps around people, right? Because we have, again, forgetting that the enemy's lies are subtle. And so, and that he's smarter than us. And the only way we can combat the attacks of the enemy is if we are in Christ.
In Christ.
And as soon as we get away from that baseline, we're lost. And we're not going to make it, right? And I saw Lecrae. He's a Christian rapper, and he was upset. He was marching, and he's getting into a lot of the confusion. And he was at a march protest. And he was really upset, and in the camera he was saying, I'm tired of marching, we've been marching since the 60s, I'm tired of saying their name, and just really emotional. And he said he has racial trauma in another tweet, and I was kind of like, And I'm thinking, but he is very successful. But then his response, he says, and he's a Christian, mind you. Okay, we've been marching forever, we've been marching. Go start a business, start your own business, telling people, go get a job, create businesses. I'm like, good. But even that's not going to fix anything, truly. And I love, I'm looking at Daryl B. Harrison has been just shouting truth. Virgil Walker has been, and these are black men, Christian leaders. They've been shouting truth. Samuel Say, you can look all these people up on Twitter. John Mason is another one. And you know what they keep saying? Nope. Preach the gospel. Don't go start your business. Fix your heart, because
you got to start with the heart of man.
And especially right now, I don't know why, but I've talked to a lot of Christians, and a lot of people are feeling the same thing. Yes, I think we should encourage people. Start a business, go get a job, and build up your communities. Yes, that's good. However,
that's not the cure.
And I saw one woman leader or influencer, you use that word again,
Yeah,
influencer, she had said, Jesus would go and hang with sinners, and he would befriend them, not just go to heal them, with the purpose of healing them. And I was kind of like, rewind. Okay, let's be real. Let's take that back. Jesus came to save you.
Period.
He came to save you. And in the process, we can become a friend of God. He came to save you. But when he was going around, his purpose wasn't, I'm going to go hang out with these people.
We just go chill and be buddies. No, that wasn't what he was about.
He came to share the truth to save them. And in the social gospel, it's getting away from that. And they're focusing on, no, be friends. Befriend the world. No, if you're a friend of the world, what does the Bible say?
The Bible says if you are a friend of the world, you're not a friend of God.
And I'm like, I just take the word for what it says.
This is what I get when I have my discussion with my friends, especially when we're talking about worldview.
Right.
I go back to what the scripture says. Let God be true and every man a liar.
Right.
So when I come to a point of contrast where this is what I'm hearing from people and this is what the word of God says, I have to make a decision because we're not walking together. So who am I going to follow? Am I going to follow Christ? Am I going to follow culture? Am I going to follow my comfort? Am I going to follow ease? Am I going to follow my brother? Or am I going to follow Christ? That's what we have to decide. Because if we keep just running behind every philosophy or every wind of doctrine, we're going to be just like this, back and forth, never getting anywhere. And so we have to, as a people, decide, if I am a Christian, what does that mean?
Right.
What does that mean? I was listening to Dr. King's speech earlier. I just wanted to hear it again on his speech, The Two Americas. And he again was talking about the use of riots and the use of violent protests and destruction. And he says, I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it because you can't get true gains by violent riot and destruction. You never get the true gains that you want. Because how am I going to get this man to come alongside me when I'm destroying his house? What's going to end up will be he won't have a house, I won't have a house. We both have nothing, so we start fighting all over again.
Right.
And so we have to come to the place, and we have to understand, like Jesus said, that if someone comes to me, I am to pray for them. I am to bless those who despitefully use me. See, that's Christian. That's not the world.
Right.
The world said, try and hit me and see what happens. Jesus says what? Pray for those who hate you. Bless those who despitefully use you.
That reminds me of the two women that I watched. I wish I knew their names. In that Captive in Iran.
Add the reference. We'll add the reference.
But she had said when she was in prison that she really learned there's a difference between knowing the word and living the word. And just like the verses you just said, right? Because people would say evil, nasty things, and you're in prison, you're being mistreated. And she would just hear the Lord telling her, love those who persecute you.
Yes.
Pray for them. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's easy when no one's spitting at you.
Right. It's easy to say, carry his pack 2 miles when you don't have to go anywhere. Yeah. You see, this is what I mean. The gospel of Jesus Christ is designed for practical living. It's not about theoretical arguments and standing and discuss. It's no good. I go back to these analogies just because of my background, but it's like if you have a person who's learning the martial arts and they can do katas and high smooth kicks all day long, but if they can't handle themselves in a fight, then all their training is vain.
Right.
And that's what most people's Christianity is that their Christianity is made up of church service and going and being part of this group, being recognized as part of this denomination or having this position or this office. But at the end of the day, you look again, we have a country that we are committed to as Christians to try to save as long as we're here. And so, yes, I will go on record and say that if you are a believer, if you are a child of God, I find it impossible for you to be a liberal.
Right now.
I find it impossible to be a liberal. How are you going to support a party or a group of people who want to kill and destroy babies?
Right.
How are you going to hold fast to a philosophy that is counter to the philosophy of Christ? And so I think it comes again to where it is time for us as believers to take a stand for righteousness. Now, there's no man that is perfect. I go on record and say that. And I support President Trump. I look forward to him being elected. I hope he gets elected in a landslide this coming November. However, he is not perfect. And there's times I wish he wouldn't tweet some of the things he tweets. But you know what? When he stands up for historical black colleges the way he has, when he does this police reform like he just did, you know, that's a man who's taking action.
Right.
He's not just trying to get photo ops. He's not just trying to make people feel sorry for him like so many of our leaders do in the past, where they try to get everybody all emotional, but they go back to Washington, D.C. and nothing changes. Right. This man has been changing things. He's been changing this country. And that's why we're in the state we're in now. Yeah. This civil war is real. And the powers that be, Malcolm X said it best. He said, when it comes down to it, there's no real Democrat or Republican. There is liberal and conservative. Right. And that's where he said they've been fighting. And Malcolm X saw this, tells this again, it goes to the brilliance of the man. He saw this back in the early 60s. He said, if you Negroes still run around here talking you Republican or Democrat, you already messed up.
He's like, you're missing the point. And really, it's even more simple than that. I was talking to someone, and I was just telling him, I was like, you know, it's actually really simple. It always has been from the beginning of time. Always. Good versus evil. Really, in everything. You think about it, a lot of the stuff comes down to, and granted, there are some fights between evil, and it's like, well, we know how that's going to end.
Evil wins!
Evil wins. But as believers, when you look at it, I'm like, it really is that simple. I heard an old Ron Canoli song, and he'd be talking in it, and he said, you know, you're either on the Lord's side or you're on the devil's side. There is no demilitarized zone. And I always remember that. Like,
that's what Jesus said.
There's no
either for
neutral.
me
it's always
or
like,
against me.
Yeah.
He who does not gather with me is scattering abroad. This is the Jesus of the Bible, not this namby-pamby socialistic Jesus that people talk around. We walk around. No, we don't want that Jesus. He can't help you. That Jesus can't help you. We want the one who was man enough to stand up to the systems of government in his day and say, you are whitewashed sepulchers. Right. You are blind leading the blind. Right. He stood up and called out what was wrong. He called it wrong to their face. Right. And that's what we as believers, especially ministers of the gospel, we've got to stop kowtowing to social pressure.
And I think, too, a part of that that's so important, because I've heard people respond to that being like, yeah, but where's the love? And it's like, yes, in love. Jesus, the Son of God, fully man, okay? And he never compromised.
Ever.
But he was he is love. God is love. Jesus was the epitome of love. And he didn't compromise. And so I think sometimes the way we view things, we think, no, if you say something very true, that's mean. Right. That's rude. Sometimes it hurts because, let's be real, it's like that tough love in the sense that the truth hurts.
Sometimes it hurts because it hurts.
Yeah, but as believers, I think that's why it's important to make sure we are in Christ, because I can't properly love you unless I am in Christ. And it will be,
I mean, you
have the wrong, motivation.
Right. Now you talk about love. And I hear this example. Jesus was a friend of prostitutes. Yeah, but he didn't leave them as prostitutes. Right. Now look in contrast to Black Lives Matter now. What's their platform now?
They want to
legalize sex
work.
They want to find a young lady as a prostitute and leave her there.
And a lot of those women,
they want to make her feel good.
They're slaves.
They want to make her feel good about being a slave. They want to make her feel good about a lifestyle of being used
shame.
To use. Yeah, but Jesus, you talking about you want to be like Jesus. Jesus didn't come along to leave Mary Magdalene as a prostitute. He elevated her life. He made her gave her a more quality state of being, not to mention eternal life.
You know, it makes me think even about like the woman with the issue of blood, right? I feel like people today would be like, you know, that's an abnormality and we want you to feel comfortable with it.
Just let her bleed.
Just let it.
Let her bleed.
Just let her, you know, she has the right.
Ignore the blood when you see it. It's okay.
You know, and I was like, well, thanks for loving me. No.
While I could sit here and bleed to death.
Jesus is like, come, touch me.
Let's deal with it.
You know, like, let's deal with it. Let's fix it.
When the leper came, he embraced him, but he didn't leave him as a leper. Right. And see, this is what we have to do as the church. I'm sorry, this critical race theory, it comes across and it sounds so good. It sounds so sweet.
Because they use Christianese words, too.
They steal the words and the language from the church, but they change the definitions. And the same thing with Black Lives Matter. They hijack what I call black pain. They hijack it and use it to establish their own platform. If the black person who loves Black Lives Matter would take the time to look up what they really believe, not just to put stuff they put on their webpage, but go into their philosophical positions. Right. Look at what they say about themselves. Look at what they're doing. And you could not support them in good heart. You could not, because they're not for black people. Right. They're not for black people. And if they're not for black people, that means they're also not for America. They have their own private agenda. And what it comes down to is what we've said 1,000 times. It's not critical race theory. It's critical elite theory. Right. And there's always that group of elitists. They think they're better than everybody else. And if they can't swoop you with money and diamonds, then they just beat you down.
Well, Ami Dorowitz, I believe his name is. He does like independent documentary type things for, I think, Fox News. Maybe something else, but it's on Fox. Was where I saw it. But he went into Chaz, now known as Chop. And he was just talking to people about their philosophy, and he was talking to one of the leaders of it. And she was very clear.
Very, very matter of fact.
We're for she said, at any cost.
Misquoting Malcolm X.
Yeah. And she said, we'll do whatever it takes. And she's like, and you cannot fix this. She's like, in order for things to change, you need to break it completely down, and we need to rebuild it. And so she even said their mission, they're not going to, I don't think they're going to stop in November. She even said, like, we want to see everything destroyed so that we can build it the way they want. And I'm like, that is problematic.
See, this is my belief system here. The Democratic Party, who has been chumming up to Black Lives Matter, they think they have a pit bull on string. And they think they got this pit bull, and they can use this dog.
You're in
and they're going to use him to the way they want him.
Right.
And then when they get everything they want out of Black Lives Matter, i.e. what they really want is the destruction of President Trump, and to establish, should I say, this socialist government system. If they can use Black Lives Matter to do that, then what they want to do is go, okay, now we don't need this dog anymore. We're going to either put it in a kennel or we're going to put it down. But what my concern is, what I'm hearing Black Lives Matter's members say is that they're not going back in the kennel.
Right.
And so even though the Democrat Party now and the liberal far left wing of this nation's government has encouraged this beast to rove all over the country, thinking that they can control it, they got a beast on their hands.
Right.
And this civil war is only in this first phase. It's not going away, because these ideas are going to be at battle with each other. And I think sooner or later the Liberal Party is going to realize that they've created a beast. As Tucker Carlson said in his show a couple of nights ago, Black Lives Matter is a political party. They are a political party. They're not just an activist group.
They have a lot of influence.
Political power. They have forced the New York City Police Department to bow its knee. The largest police department on the face of the earth. They made it bow its knee.
So sad.
LAPD, their knees are trembling, ready to go down. We have a school out here in Idaho where a principal told his SRO to take down his thin blue line flag. It's like,
talk about the thought police. Like, this is literally like dystopian novels coming to life.
Right.
I never thought this would happen.
This is 1984.
It is wild.
In 2020.
It's wild.
This is Hunger Games, y'all. It's all happening.
For real. You name it. Brave New World.
It's all coming. It's all coming. And so I'm just like, at what point are the rest of America going to stand up and say enough is enough?
Right.
I was looking at a video from CHOP. And they're using taxpayers' money now to build this little wall. So they got city workers out there doing it. I'm thinking, what about all the citizens of that area who don't agree with them? Who doesn't agree with this anarchy? You're using them to finance the destruction of their own community?
Yeah, that's
and how does that make sense?
It doesn't.
You're going to use taxpayer dollars to fight against taxpayers.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And so I say, hey, it's not going to be long before you're going to push, and it's going to push back. This clash, if we don't get a control of this, and this is where the church comes in, and I implore you, if you are a child of God, you have got to do like Jesus said and let your light shine. People have to see God in you, because we're living in a time where we're headed to some serious violence.
Right.
These people have proven that they're willing to kill. They're proven that they're willing to destroy and to steal. What's that sound like? Steal, kill, and destroy. What's that sound like?
Sounds like the father of the devil.
It's John 10:10, right? The thief comes but to steal, to kill, and destroy. They've proven their character.
Right.
And so they're not ashamed to do what they believe in. And so unless we as a people can rise up in like way, and that's why I thought about the Declaration of Independence, is that these colonies said enough's enough.
Right.
And they pushed back, and we had the Revolutionary War. So we're at that place now in America where I think if we don't wake up soon, we may not have much left to fight for.
Right.
I mean, just make one point. I was listening to this thing where the NFL players and NBA players are talking about they're going to stop all that. I'm like, NBA players, NFL, you guys need to realize that we don't need you. You need us. You need us to maintain your $1 million lifestyle.
It's called capitalism.
So, I just say, America, let them have whatever they want and just leave it to them.
Yeah.
Because you got this thought
they need the demand. If there's no demand,
it's destroying America. And we have to be bigger than our individual desires.
Right.
The pride of life, the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. We got to be bigger than that and be willing to make those personal sacrifices in order that righteousness may prevail.
Right.
I think about Dr. King. You know, these guys, they're talking about these sacrifices. And Dr. King and people like him, they marched knowing that they may be killed.
Right.
They marched knowing that they may be assaulted.
But as they went in with the resolve, we're not going to meet violence with violence.
Right.
They made
no
that.
matter what.
They made that decision ahead of time.
No matter what. And I remember the sermon in Memphis, Tennessee, the night before Dr. King was killed. He made this speech. He says, "We as a people, we're going to go to the promise." He says, "I may not get there with you, but I've been to the mountaintop." He's referencing Deuteronomy, right? How Moses went up and he looked down. He didn't get in with him because of a failing on his part. He didn't get in with him. So he says, "I may not get there with you." He said, "But I know that we as a people, we will get to the promised land." And because of that resolve,
right,
and the resolve of hundreds of others like him, some whose names we don't even know, some whose names were never written in any letter or any history book.
It's just like in the Bible where it says, "And others who did spread the gospel." It's like,
they
you don't know them.
stood in righteousness for righteousness' sake. There's a lot of
Right.
people we know about, that the people who were killed and martyred as a part of the Freedom Riders, and people who were beaten and killed as they were protesting. We know some of them, but there was people who were killed that nobody knew about. They just wound up missing. But they stood for righteousness. Maybe they stood for one person at a time. They stood up for righteousness. And those people, their blood paid for the price of our freedom. And now we might have to make that same price. And I say to the church, it is our time to stand up, because we've seen what the other side is doing. They're not playing, guys. They're not playing. They're for real. They're for real. There's people being killed. There's women and children and men, families being killed, business being destroyed. These people are for real. And it's time for us who are the children of God to be real.
Yep. Can't say it much clearer than that.
Sometimes you get behind the why and you have to go, "Oh my."
And then you say, "Oh Jesus."
Yes.
Help us.
Precious Lord, take my hand.
Yes.
Lead me on. Let me stand.
And put on the armor. That's what I was thinking
when you
earlier.
Get behind the why.
All
you
the
look
armor.
at the heart of man and you go, "Wow, there
The
is
ugly,
darkness
deceitfully
there."
deceitfully wicked. I consider it. I said equid. Yeah. I went to
All right
college.
then. So that takes us to one more chapter of Behind the Why.
Yep.
As we look at this situation down in Atlanta, I just remind you again, it's like the rule of law has to matter, and it has to matter for every person every time. We can't throw it out when it's somebody we don't like or a cause that we're against, because if I throw it out for them, the next time around, they may throw it out for me.
Right.
And we want equal justice, right?
Yep.
So you know what we say at this point, right?
We say
Peace. Love you. Stay behind the why.